Okay, now let's go back here and look at this. How did it start? This is a man named Lawrence Isley. He wrote a book called Darwin's Century, Evolution and the Men Who Discovered It, printed in 1961. And he went back and tried to answer this question that people don't like to talk about. How did the scientific revolution start? He says, the philosophy of experimental science began its discoveries and made use of its methods in the faith, not the knowledge, that it was dealing with a rational universe controlled by a creator who did not act on whim. Very interesting. He did not just do things because he felt like it. He did it because he had purposes. And that is what started science. It was this belief. So I wanted to show you there are other people who have said this, but then pretty soon they just sort of ignore them and they push them out. And if they don't teach it in school, they do not teach these things in school. It is censored. So that's why the things I'm going to say are going to sound very weird. It's because they censor them, and they when they ask them, it's like teaching a child about sex. You know, Mommy, how does this work? Ask your father. They don't want to talk about it. And this is the same way here. What started the scientific revolution? Maybe it had to do with the university, and maybe it was the Enlightenment. Belief in God and the reading the Bible. Oh, don't talk about that. But this guy did, and if you study it, you'll find that it really has a lot of basis. He continued, it's surely one of the curious paradoxes of history that science, which professionally has little to do with faith. Now this is the reason why they don't want to talk about it. Because when you talk about science, that's not to do with religion. What's your religion? That has nothing to do with science. He said it has nothing to do with faith. Owes its origins to an act of faith that the universe can be rationally interpreted, and that science today is sustained by that assumption. Oh, even today, science needs to have a faith, an assumption that the universe can be rationally interpreted, or you can't do science. Oh. And where did that faith that it can be actually rationally interpreted come from? Let's look. Genesis 1:1. God created heaven and earth. It was made by a person. Now, if you believe that, then you'll say, oh, then it must be made in some purposeful way. A person made it. Must be made. And then there's this other one. I'm being very brief. We could go on for hours with these. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. Now, just imagine, regardless of what you believe, just imagine if you believed this, what will that lead you to conclude? Wouldn't it lead you to conclude that it's a structured system and we can and should learn about it? Right. There's a structure made by God, and can I learn about that? Well, it says ask of God, and he'll give you what you need to know. Yeah, I can. It gave them the belief. Let's look at some quotes. Robert Boyle, the founder of modern chemistry. Students still learn Boyle's law of gases. From a knowledge of his work, we shall know him. Oh, that was just a coincidence. That's just one crazy religious guy in the midst. No, it isn't. Look at another thing. I'm just giving you the brief outline, and then we'll look at some more quotes a little later. Test all things. Hold to what is good. Test yourselves. Oh, if I believe that, then I will also believe that we should verify everything. It makes sense. You start reading the Bible, you start reading these things, and these people were not just Bible readers, they were Bible believers. Okay, again, if you just imagine, if you believed this, wouldn't you conclude this belief that was the founding support for the attitudes and the habits of the science. Okay? It would give you a careful, humble attitude. Say, I need to test things. We need to test things. Was it just an accident that Wilbur and Orville Wright were the sons of a Methodist bishop? I don't think so. The principles, their father was a leader in his church, and he taught his children those principles. And he said, hey, the Bible says, test things. Here's another quote from the Bible, Genesis 1st chapter, verse 28. Fill the earth and subdue it. This is a command given by God to the creation. And the people who believed this said, oh, we are supposed to control the earth. Oh, we're not doing that. Seems like the earth is controlling us. We don't even know how to stop diseases. We don't know how to go travel around the world. We don't know how to fly. We don't know how to do these things. But God told us to do them. Robert Boyle actually wrote a book about this. We're not looking at that, of course, now because they don't have enough time. But he wrote about explaining this is why he was doing his chemistry studies. How about Jesus' statement, seek and you shall find? That might give you the idea. There will be good results if we invest time and effort. I will be able to find things. I will be able to control the earth. Because God told me to do it. If God told me to do it, and I really believe that, then I should be able to control it. Why would God tell me to do something I can't? It's impossible. It's possible. Now we know why the original scientists would face people like the Wright brothers, saying, no, if God wanted us to fly, he would have given us wings. You won't be able to do that. You'll never be able to do that. And they said, oh, yes, we can. How did they know that? They believed the Bible. That's why they did it. Okay? We'll see that in a minute. James Clerk Maxwell, a great discovery of the Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism that founded modern communication systems. They don't teach you this in school, but here's one of the prayers he prayed. He wrote it down, and they found it in his things after he died. Almighty God, teach us to study the works of your hands, that we may subdue the earth to our use. Okay, how about this one? All things you would like men to do to you, do also to them. That's Jesus' statement in Matthew. Wouldn't that give you the idea? If you really believed this, you really thought this was important, you would think, wouldn't I like other people to tell me if I knew something good? If somebody found a way to cure my disease, wouldn't I like them to tell me? If someone found a way to make my job easier, wouldn't I like them to tell me? If I find it, I should tell them too. Here's a more modern scientist, Raymond Damation, inventor of the magnetic resonance imaging. You could see inside the body in full color. Well, they interpret the color, but you can see very great detail by generating magnetic waves. Very interesting. He had a lot of interesting things. He had a quote I read once, and I lost the source, where people were telling him, you can't do it. This is impossible to make the body generate radio waves. And he said, I can do it because God will help me. But I'm going to show his cooperative attitude here. This is Raymond Damation standing in the Smithsonian Institute where his first prototype was placed. And he said this: the highest purpose a man can find for his life is to serve the will of God. They don't tell you that. They censor that. And in fact, he lost a Nobel Prize because the Nobel Committee did not want him to get a platform to preach his beliefs. It's censored now. He also did not get a good reward for his device. Someone else took his ideas and he lost pretty much everything. So he didn't really get any financial gain by this. But he has the satisfaction of knowing that he can help people. Okay? Let's look at some of the other people to say this is not just one guy. I'm going to go quickly through this. Johannes Kepler made the first scientific laws in his lifetime in the 1500s to 1600s, and he called the father of modern optics. He made this statement: science is thinking God's thoughts after him. That was his view of science. And he said, since we as astronomers are priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it befits us to be thoughtful not of the glory of our minds, but rather about, above all else, of the glory of God. This is censored. Johannes Kepler, the scientist, viewed his role as a priest. He says, I'm representing God. That was what his goal was. Von Leeuwenhoek, I don't know how to say that very well. He's from Holland. He was the father of microbiology. He studied microscopic organisms, protozoology, parasitology, bacteriology. He was the first to get into those, look into worms, fleas, and insects and cells. And here's what he said. It is to be hoped, then, that inquirers into nature's works will more and more place the discovery of the truth before the eyes of all. We should show them to everybody. For we cannot in any better manner glorify the Lord and Creator of the universe. That was the attitude of all of the founding scientists. Isaac Newton, he's a giant, so he gets a special color treatment. He discovered the laws of gravity, laws of motion, reflector telescope. He discovered how the Kepler's laws worked. He discovered the nature of light, and he developed calculus and a few other things. Here's what he said. This most beautiful system could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all. We know him only by his most wise and excellent contrivances of things. We admire him for his perfections, but we reverence and adore him as his servants. I heard Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, try to explain away this by saying, everybody at that time was a believer in God. That's the most ridiculous thing, because one of Isaac Newton's contemporaries was Voltaire, the famous atheist. What do you mean everybody was a believer in God? They weren't. And Voltaire did not make the discoveries. Isaac Newton did. And it's because he had the culture. He knew that if he investigated, he would find the answers. Michael Faraday. Very interesting story of Michael Faraday. In Cochabamba, they have a street named after him because people have recognized he was one of the most fundamental developers for the modern science for electricity. He developed electrochemistry, electroplating, electric generator, and electric motor, along with Joseph Henry in the U.S. And they had the same beliefs, by the way. He invented the words here. Albert Einstein kept Faraday's picture in his office. Everybody thinks Einstein was a great scientist, and he was a great scientist. But he said, Michael Faraday is my teacher. And Michael Faraday, in his later years, he began to lose his mind. He had some form of Alzheimer's. Maybe it's because he was exposed to some toxic compounds in his experiments. But it was interesting. He said, my mental facilities are passing little by little. What happiness is that the true good does not lie in them. As they decay, may they leave us as little children, trusting in the Father of mercy and receiving his unspeakable gift. I bow before him who is Lord of all. It's not just a couple of guys. It's all of them. James Joule, that we use his name as the unit of electrical energy. Newton meters equals joules. He discovered the effect used in refrigeration, called the father of thermodynamics. He said, after the knowledge of and obedience to the will of God, the next aim must be to know something of his attributes of wisdom, power, and goodness, as evidenced by his handiwork. It is evident that acquaintance with natural laws means no less than an acquaintance with the mind of God therein expressed. These guys all viewed their science as an extension of their belief in God. And so it's showing that it isn't just an accident. When they started reading the Bible, these people started coming out. If they didn't have this belief, they wouldn't have had any basis for doing their science. Louis Pasteur, he founded microbiology, more science. Leeuwenhoek started it, but Louis Pasteur advanced it. And we have a street in Cochabamba, Bolivia, named after Louis Pasteur. He said, "Science brings men nearer to God. The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator." Lord Kelvin did a huge amount of scientific work, made the first transatlantic cable, which we're still depending on now to get our internet. We still use cables, not satellites so much. In regard to the origin of life and science, it all positively affirms a creative power at work. Do not be afraid to be free thinkers. If you think strongly enough, you will be forced by science to the belief in God. I wonder if that's true. Interesting. That's not my point. My point is, these guys were all working based on their belief in God. George Washington Carver, very interesting man. He was a Negro slave in the south of the U.S., and he became a very great scientist. Again, he did go get an education, but it wasn't his privileged background and his money. He didn't do this for the money. He gave all his discoveries free to the public. And he got a medal from President Franklin Roosevelt in 1939. He died in 1943, in the middle of World War II. He said, "Without my Savior, I am nothing." He said, "Mr. Creator, why did you make the peanut?" He said, "How did you find all these discoveries?" I asked God. He said, "I love to think of nature as an unlimited broadcasting station through which God speaks to us every hour, if only we will tune in." And he was famous on his tombstone. They put this saying, "He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found happiness and honor to be helpful to others." This is what science was, and the way science advanced to give these different characteristics. Okay, now, but just before I finish, I want to address this question. Why do people think science today is related to atheism? And it is true that many people today who do science are atheists. Many of the developers, many of the scientists, engineers are atheists today. And that's why it seems so strange. That's why it's censored. Why people don't want to talk about the foundation of science, the culture that allows science to happen, coming from Bible reading or Bible beliefs. Because now we don't like to think about that. And how is it possible now then, if this is true, that reading the Bible caused these people to develop their technology and their scientific laws, as they said, why then today do we consider that to be atheism? And how can atheists do science today? Well, I'm just suggesting that the beliefs have to be the same. I don't want to go through them really quickly right now. We're going to do that in just a minute. But the beliefs that we can know the universe, we should work carefully and humbly. We should work efficiently because there will be good results. And we should help other people with them so that we can spread science quickly. You have to believe those. And we'll find out the atheists actually do believe those things. But when you ask them why, they don't know. Well, I think the reason they know these things is because now we have a solid 400 years of scientific advancement. And you can see the truth of these by looking at the advance of science. So now you don't need to believe the Bible to know that you can advance science, that you can find the laws, that they will be helpful, and that we should share them and make life better for people. You just look at the science and you know that. At the beginning, they didn't have anything to look at to show them that. They did it because they had faith. And then they got their faith because they already believed that the Bible was true. And that's why they did it. Now, you don't have to be a Bible believer to have these fundamental supporting beliefs. Science shows that they are true. Listen to Dr. Isaac Asimov, a famous atheist. He's now passed on. He was a very prominent author of both scientific books and science fiction books. And he said this in a book. He wrote a book called Counting the Eons, and he said, I'm an atheist. He was very open about that. He came from a Jewish family of Russian background, but he was an atheist himself. And he said, I have faith too. I have beliefs too. He said, I believe that the universe is comprehensible within the bounds of natural law, and that the human brain can discover those natural laws and comprehend the universe. Amazing! He believed the same thing that the early scientists did. They got that belief from the Bible. Where did Isaac Asimov get it? Look at the bottom here. I have no evidence for this. It is simply what I have faith in and what I believe. Just because. I just believe it because I believe it. If he didn't believe it, he couldn't do science. You have to believe this to do science. Now, he added something else in red here. I believe that nothing beyond those natural laws is needed. Now, that is something very interesting. I put it in red. He didn't put it in red. I put it in red because I think it's very impressive. This belief is different. The other scientists, starting with Kepler and Boyle, and Newton, Faraday, Joule, all those guys would not agree with this because they express their belief that God was the supporter. Remember Michael Faraday saying, my brain's going away, but it's great that I can just trust in God. I need God to help. Isaac says, I don't need God. I don't need anything beyond natural scientific laws. That's all I need. Okay? This is now what, in the modern understanding of science, people think this is also a needed belief. And so if a person believes in the Bible and says, no, I need God to help me, I need to ask God, I need to pray, I need to read the Bible, I need to go to the church, or whatever they need in their religion they need to do, they say, well, you're not a good scientist, because a good scientist only trusts in natural laws. Natural laws is everything to the scientist. That's the modern view. That was not the founding view. But when you talk to an atheist scientist like Dr. Asimov, you find out that they had the same fundamental four beliefs that I said were needed for science. Dr. Asimov wrote books. Why? Because he wanted other people to see what he knew. He wanted to help other people. Why did he study? He believed that it's possible to learn these, and it will be good to do that. It will have good results. Why do you believe that, Dr. Asimov? I don't know. I have no evidence for it. Very interesting. So, when we come up with this original question we said, I hope you see now that the historical progress of science shows this is true. Attitudes formed by our beliefs produce work habits that affect what we can accomplish. And here's a little summary. With these beliefs and attitudes, a system exists and we should learn it. We get optimism to learn and prepare with enthusiasm. We should all verify. That belief gives us a humble attitude that causes us to work carefully and accept correction. There will be good results. Gives us a belief, an attitude of willingness to work hard, which makes me accomplish as much as I can. Not work myself to death, just do, in my 8 hours, I try to do as much as I can. All should benefit, gives us a cooperative attitude, that causes us to collaborate. These are what cause technological progress. If a country has this, it will progress. If it doesn't, if it has those other things like fatalism, laziness, selfishness, pessimism, it's not going to progress. That's the end of the story. The only question is, how can you maintain these? How can you maintain these habits? You have to have these beliefs. How can you get those beliefs? The first scientists looked at the Bible, and they got them from there. Today, scientists look at science and get them from there. But wherever you get them, you have to have them. You have to have all of these four beliefs, attitudes, and work habits. So let's have the attitudes that move the technology. Optimism, humility, effort, cooperation. The secret is out. Can you do it? I noted in the history of the technological developments that it's slowing down. The last 20 years or so, we haven't really developed any new discoveries. There are some, but nothing like it was when they were doing 3 new major discoveries every year. We aren't doing that anymore. Why not? I suggest that our culture has become eroded, and we've started to accept beliefs that do not lead us to advance. And especially places like the United States, my native country, Europe, where the scientific revolution started. Now we know why it started there. It's because that's where they had that culture. Why did it continue? Now Japan has become a leader in technology, and China's sort of developing it too. Why? Well, it's because they looked at these advances in science and adopted that culture. They dropped their old culture and they accepted a new one. To that extent, they've been able to continue. But if they don't maintain that, and I think they're not maintaining it completely in all areas, they're not going to be able to sustain that progress. And that's the unfortunate situation that we are facing. But now we know the secret. So a country like Bolivia, that in the past has not been a great advanced country in the area of technology, they've imported it from other countries. The secret's simple. You have to develop a culture in this country that will maintain these beliefs, attitudes, and work habits. And I finish a couple funny cartoons that illustrate some of the obstacles to progress. Okay, first develops a wheel. No, they're too busy. I'm afraid that's often the case. It says pessimism, pride. Look at that pride. No, we don't need your help. We're too busy. We don't have time. And it wouldn't really do any good if we stop and let you put those wheels on our cart. You can see that right there. Just look back at the the negative things that cause us to not do the technology, and they're right here. And I thought I'd end with another quote from Confucius, they call him in English, famous Chinese philosopher. He had some good ideas. The whole culture of China did not continue the advance. But this is his attitude of humility, which is very good. The man who asks the question is a fool for a minute. The man who does not ask is a fool for life. Well, we'll close with that, showing that there are many good ideas all over the world. But to sustain progress, you need all of these 4 things. That's the challenge that we all have. So I hope this helped. And I hope you are interested to study this further and help humanity do some real progress. Thanks for watching.